There are a lot of people around the NBA right now looking towards San Francisco and trying to understand exactly what is happening behind the scenes with the Warriors. Anyone who follows the league closely knows that when a franchise starts moving like this, it usually means one thing: the window is closing and nobody inside the organization wants to accept that quietly. The truth is that March of 2026 has brought a different feeling around the franchise. For years, Golden State lived with that aura of being the team that was always a few steps ahead of the rest of the league. That light years ahead identity that defined an entire era of basketball. But the landscape today looks very different. The team still has heavy names in the locker room. Stephen Curry still runs the entire engine on the court. Draymond Green is still the defensive brain of the group. And now there is also the competitive edge of Jimmy Butler, who arrived bringing a tougher mentality to this roster. But internally, there is a very clear awareness. The clock is no longer paused. Curry is still the kind of player who forces entire defenses to panic just because of the way he moves without the ball. But everyone understands that his career has entered the stage where every season begins to feel precious. It is no longer about slowly developing young players. It is no longer about waiting 3 or 4 years for a project to mature. For a long time, the Warriors tried to live in 2 timelines at once. The organization insisted on competing for championships while also trying to grow young prospects who were supposed to represent the future of the franchise. James Wiseman, Jonathan Kuminga, Jordan Poole. At one point, those names looked like the foundation of a new era. But looking back now, the result of that experiment left a bitter taste inside the Chase Center. Those players are no longer there. They were moved over time through different trades and different decisions, and today the feeling that remains is that the strategy delayed moves that maybe should have been made earlier, and that is where Mike Dunleavy comes in. People around the league say the Warriors' general manager has had some very direct conversations internally in recent weeks, not about rebuilding, but about the exact opposite. The idea gaining momentum inside the organization is simple but risky. If there is still a real chance to give Curry one more serious run at a championship, then the moment to push everything forward is right now. That mindset is exactly what led to the aggressive roster moves we have already seen. First came the trade that brought Jimmy Butler, a player who has never been afraid of turning playoff series into personal battles. Then, the front office reinforced the front court by bringing in Kristaps Porzingis, a player who changes offensive spacing dramatically when healthy and fits naturally next to Curry's gravity. On paper, the starting lineup immediately grabs attention. Elite shooting, strong perimeter defense, rim protection, and a group full of playoff experience. But even with those changes, there is still a sense inside the organization that this might not be enough to survive the Western Conference. Because when the Warriors look around the conference, the landscape is not exactly comfortable. Oklahoma City has youth and depth. Denver remains a problem every time Nikola Jokic is on the floor, and there is enormous respect around the league for what Victor Wembanyama is building in San Antonio. So a question has started circulating more and more among executives and agents across the NBA. And when those kinds of conversations begin, it usually means something big might be developing. Behind the scenes, some people close to the team believe Golden State may not be done adjusting the chessboard. In fact, there is growing expectation that the real move might be waiting for next summer. And that is exactly where the rumors start getting much heavier. Because when certain names began appearing in those internal conversations, a lot of people around the league paused for a moment to figure out whether it could actually happen, or if we are looking at one of those stories that sounds impossible until the moment it suddenly becomes real. Over the past few days, a comment circulating among journalists who regularly speak with league executives started gaining traction. It was not a random rumor floating on social media. It came from people who usually measure every word carefully before speaking publicly. And when that happens, rival teams pay attention. The information suggests that inside the Warriors' environment there is a very specific expectation. The front office believes a massive name could become available next summer. We are not talking about a role player. This is not about a veteran to fill out the rotation. The discussion involves players who completely shift the weight of any franchise. 2 names started appearing repeatedly in those conversations: Giannis Antetokounmpo, LeBron James. Just imagining those scenarios is enough to understand why executives across the league are watching every Warriors move with almost obsessive attention. Because if one of those players truly enters Golden State's radar, the impact across the NBA would be immediate. With Giannis, the logic is easy to understand. He remains one of the most physically dominant forces the game has ever seen. A player who forces entire defensive systems to reorganize the moment he attacks the rim. Now imagine that next to Stephen Curry. NBA defenses already live in constant tension, trying to deal with the space Curry creates beyond the arc. If they also had to deal with Giannis attacking downhill at the same time, the defensive math becomes chaotic. Coaches around the league understand that. But there is an enormous obstacle in that equation. Milwaukee is not letting a player like that leave without demanding an extraordinary return. A deal of that magnitude would almost certainly require multiple assets, key players, and extremely complex salary engineering that would reshape the Warriors' roster completely. Even so, there are people around the league who believe Golden State might be willing to pay an extreme price if it means giving Curry one more legitimate title window while he is still performing at this level. Then there is the other path, LeBron. His situation in Los Angeles has been watched closely by executives throughout the NBA. His contract situation, the direction of the franchise, the timing of his career. Several factors create a growing sense that that chapter may be approaching its natural end. Even with time moving forward, nobody inside the league treats LeBron like an ordinary player. His basketball brain remains one of the greatest assets any team could possibly add. The way he controls tempo, reads defenses, and creates opportunities before anyone else sees them simply does not disappear. And there is one detail many people around the league have not forgotten. When Curry and LeBron shared the floor with Team USA during the 2024 Paris Olympics, the chemistry looked almost effortless. Two players who spent years battling each other in legendary finals suddenly looked perfectly comfortable playing together. Some executives remember that experience every time this rumor resurfaces. Now imagine placing that alongside Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green in the same locker room. That would not just be talent. It would be an unbelievable concentration of basketball intelligence and playoff experience in one place. But the part many league insiders continue debating is something else entirely. Because one thing is discussing these scenarios in theory. Something completely different is turning them into reality within the NBA's financial structure. And this is where the story becomes even more intriguing, because there is another element inside this situation that could completely reshape whether the Warriors' plan actually becomes possible. That element is something that rarely makes headlines when superstar rumors begin circulating: the brutal mathematics of the NBA salary cap. No matter how exciting superstar names sound, there is always a financial maze behind every blockbuster move. Within the current league structure, building a roster stacked with superstars requires almost unbelievable creativity from the front office. Around the league, some executives admit that Mike Dunleavy has been studying different scenarios far in advance. It is not only about who might arrive, but also about who might have to leave in order to create space. Contracts, exceptions, sign and trade possibilities, future draft picks, everything becomes part of that equation. And here is something many people outside the league might not fully realize. Golden State has already proven it is not afraid to spend. The Warriors' ownership group has paid astronomical luxury tax penalties for years in order to keep the team competitive. During the dynasty era, the franchise repeatedly broke financial records across the league. Internally, the message has always been clear. As long as there is a real championship window with Curry on the floor, money will not be the main obstacle. But even for an ownership group willing to spend heavily, the league's rules still exist. That is why some agents believe that if a move actually happens, it would likely involve an extremely complex negotiation, possibly including multiple teams at once, something that would shift several rosters simultaneously and potentially reshape the balance of power in the Western Conference. Meanwhile, inside the Warriors' locker room, there is a strange mixture of calm and tension. Curry continues to show the same quiet composure publicly. People who follow the team closely know he rarely gets involved in speculation. But there is a perception among those close to the team that he understands exactly what moment the franchise is living through. Each season now carries a different weight. It is no longer only about regular season success or playoff appearances. The legacy of one of the most transformative players in basketball history is being written during these final chapters, and because of that, there is a growing urgency inside the organization that something significant needs to happen. Some fans are excited about the possibility of one final massive move. Others watch with concern, worried that pushing everything into one gamble could leave the team with very few options if the plan fails. Because if next summer passes and none of these scenarios actually materialize, the picture could change very quickly. The roster would remain expensive, older, and with limited flexibility for adjustments. In a conference where many teams are getting younger and deeper, that could become a serious challenge for Golden State in the years ahead. Even so, the feeling around the league is that the Warriors already understand the risk. They know exactly what is at stake. And maybe the most fascinating part of this entire situation is that some subtle movements have already been noticed by rival executives. Movements that, according to several insiders, might only be the beginning of something that could grow much bigger in the coming weeks. Some executives from other teams have already started noticing small signals that normally go unnoticed by the public. Conversations with agents, quiet meetings during league events, inquiries about players who until recently seemed completely unavailable. These kinds of moves rarely happen without purpose. There is a growing sense among Western Conference executives that Golden State is mapping out scenarios far ahead of time. It does not mean a deal is already close. But when a franchise with the Warriors' history begins studying moves of this scale, the entire league pays attention. What makes it interesting is that these internal movements are not coming from a place of panic. People close to the roster describe the locker room atmosphere as focused rather than desperate. There is a quiet confidence that something could align at the right moment. Stephen Curry remains the gravitational center of the entire organization, not only because of what he does on the floor, but because of the tone he sets around the team. Veterans who have played with him often say, Curry has a rare ability to keep the group focused on the present while the front office works on the future behind the scenes. That helps explain why, even with all these rumors circulating around the franchise, the team continues competing every night without letting outside noise take over. Jimmy Butler has already changed part of the team's identity. His presence brings a competitive edge that had been missing at times in recent seasons. There are moments when Golden State used to look a little too comfortable, but Butler carries a reputation across the league for turning physical playoff battles into personal territory. Draymond Green remains the emotional and strategic anchor of the defense. Even with roster changes over the years, he is still the voice organizing rotations, anticipating offensive actions before they fully develop. Porzingis, meanwhile, added a tactical dimension the Warriors had not possessed in a while. A player with size to protect the rim and stretch the floor forces defenses into difficult decisions, especially when Curry begins his endless movement without the ball. Still, even with all these pieces in place, the organization understands that the Western Conference remains brutally competitive. There are no easy paths to June. That reality is exactly why the idea of adding another star continues to surface in internal discussions. Rival executives believe the Warriors are closely watching every unstable situation across the league. Teams that might enter rebuilding phases, players reconsidering their long-term environments, contract situations that could suddenly create opportunities. In the NBA, those moments sometimes appear out of nowhere. A trade request, a negotiation collapsing somewhere else, a franchise deciding to shift direction overnight. When that happens, the teams that were already prepared are usually the ones who move first. And according to several quiet conversations around the league, there is a growing feeling that Golden State is preparing precisely for that kind of moment. The real question now is simple. If that opportunity finally appears next summer, will the Warriors pull the trigger without hesitation? Or are we about to witness one of those stories where a massive plan comes incredibly close to happening but slips away at the last second? The answer could end up defining not only the Warriors' immediate future, but also the final great chapter of Stephen Curry's career. Around the league, many believe the next few months will reveal just how far this franchise is willing to go to keep the championship window alive. Because when a team begins studying moves of this magnitude, it usually means something might happen when when nobody expects it. And if one of those names truly appears on Golden State's horizon, the entire NBA will feel the impact. Now I want to hear from you who follow every detail of the league. Which pairing next to Curry would be the most dangerous today? And how far should the Warriors be willing to go to make it happen? If you enjoy following these stories before they turn into headlines, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next few weeks could bring some very interesting developments behind the scenes of the NBA.